The first Turkish president, Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, 1923 to 1938. Part 3. On the 8th of April 1924, Sharia courts were abolished with the law Mehakim-i Sariyanin İlgisine ve Mehakim Teşkilatine ait Akami Muadil Kanun. The removal of the caliphate was followed by an extensive effort to establish the separation of governmental and religious affairs. Education was the cornerstone in this effort. In 1923, there were three main educational groups of institutions. The most common institutions were madrasas based on Arabic, the Quran, and memorization. The second type of institution was Idadi and Sultani, the reformist schools of the Tanzimat era. The last group included colleges and minority schools in foreign languages that used the latest teaching models in educating pupils. The old medrese education was modernized. Ataturk changed the classical Islamic education for a vigorously promoted reconstruction of educational institutions. He linked educational reform to the liberation of the nation from dogma, which he believed was more important than the Turkish War of Independence. He declared, "Today, our most important and most productive task is the national education, unification and modernization affairs. We have to be successful in national education affairs, and we shall be. The liberation of a nation is only achieved through this way." In the summer of 1924, Ataturk invited American educational reformer John Dewey to Ankara to advise him on how to reform Turkish education. His public education reforms aimed to prepare citizens for roles in public life through increasing public literacy. He wanted to institute compulsory primary education for both girls and boys. Since then, this effort has been an ongoing task for the Republic. He pointed out that one of the main targets of education in Turkey had to be raising a generation nourished with what he called the public culture. The state schools established a common curriculum which became known as the unification of education. Unification of education was put into force on the 3rd of March 1924 by the Law on Unification of Education No. 430. With the new law, education became inclusive, organized on a model of the civil community. In this new design, all schools submitted their curriculum to the Ministry of National Education, a government agency modeled after other countries' ministries of education. Concurrently, the Republic abolished the two ministries and made clergy subordinate to the Department of Religious Affairs, one of the foundations of secularism in Turkey. The unification of education under one curriculum ended clerics or clergy of the Ottoman Empire, but was not the end of religious schools in Turkey. They were moved to higher education until later governments restored them to their former position in secondary after Ataturk's death. Beginning in the fall of 1925, Ataturk encouraged the Turks to wear modern European attire. He was determined to force the abandonment of the sartorial traditions of the Middle East and finalize a series of dress reforms, which were originally started by Mahmud II. The fez was established by Sultan Mahmud II in 1826 as part of the Ottoman Empire's modernization effort. The Hat Law of 1925 introduced the use of Western-style hats instead of the fez. Ataturk first made the hat compulsory for civil servants. The guidelines for the proper dressing of students and state employees were passed during his lifetime. Many civil servants adopted the hat willingly. In 1925, Ataturk wore a Panama hat during a public appearance in Kastamonu, one of the most conservative towns in Anatolia, to explain that the hat was the headgear of civilized nations. The last part of reform on dress emphasized the need to wear modern Western suits with neckties as well as fedora and derby-style hats instead of antiquated religion-based clothing such as the veil and turban in the law relating to prohibited garments of 1934. Even though he personally promoted modern dress for women, Ataturk never made specific reference to women's clothing in the law, as he believed that women would adapt to the new clothing styles of their own free will. He was frequently photographed on public business with his wife Latife Yusakligil, who covered her head in accordance with Islamic tradition. He was also frequently photographed on public business with women wearing modern Western clothes. But it was Ataturk's adopted daughters, Sabiha Gökçen and Afet İnan, who provided the real role model for the Turkish women of the future. He wrote, "The religious covering of women will not cause difficulty. This simple style of head covering is not in conflict with the morals and manners of our society. On the 30th of August 1925, Ataturk's view on religious insignia used outside places of worship was introduced in his Kastamonu speech. This speech also had another position. He said, "In the face of knowledge, science, and of the whole extent of radiant civilization, I cannot accept the presence in Turkey's civilized community of people primitive enough to seek material and spiritual benefits in the guidance of sheikhs. The Turkish Republic cannot be a country of sheikhs, dervishes, and disciples. The best, the truest order is the order of civilization. To be a man, it is enough to carry out the requirements of civilization. The leaders of dervish orders will understand the truth of my words, and will themselves close down their lodges and admit that their disciplines have grown up." On the 2nd of September, the government issued a decree closing down all Sufi orders, the tekks and other religious ideological lodges. Ataturk ordered the dervish lodges to be converted to museums, such as Mevlana Museum in Konya. The institutional expression of religious ideologies became illegal in Turkey. A politically neutral form of any religious ideology, functioning as social associations, was permitted to exist. In 1924, while the issue of Mosul was on the table, Sheikh Said began to organize the Sheikh Said Rebellion. Sheikh Said was a wealthy Kurdish tribal chief of a local Naqshbandi order in Diyarbakir. He emphasized the issue of religion. He not only opposed the abolition of the caliphate, but also the adoption of civil codes based on Western models, the closure of religious orders, the ban on polygamy, and the new obligatory civil marriage. Sheikh stirred up his followers against the policies of the government, which he considered anti-Islamic. In an effort to restore Islamic law, Sheikh's forces moved through the countryside, seized government offices and marched on the important cities of Elazig and Diyarbakir. Members of the government saw the Sheikh Said rebellion as an attempt at a counter-revolution. They urged immediate military action to prevent its spread. With the support of Ataturk, the acting Prime Minister Ali Fethi Okyar was replaced with İsmet Pasha Inonu, who on the 3rd of March 1925 ordered the invocation of the law for the maintenance of order in order to deal with the rebellion. It gave the government exceptional powers and included the authority to shut down subversive groups. The law was repealed in March 1927. There were also parliamentarians in the GNA who were not happy with these changes so many members were denounced as opposition sympathizers at a private meeting of the Republican People's Party (CHP) that Ataturk expressed his fear of being among the minority in his own party. He decided not to purge this group. After a censure motion gave the chance to have a breakaway group, Kazım Karabekir, along with his friends, established such a group on the 17th of October 1924. The censure became a confidence vote at the CHP for Ataturk. On the 8th of November, the motion was rejected by 148 votes to 18, and 41 votes were absent. The CHP held all but one seat in the parliament. After the majority of the CHP chose him, Ataturk said, "The Turkish nation is firmly determined to advance fearlessly on the path of the Republic, civilization and progress." On the 17th of November 1924, the breakaway group established the Progressive Republican Party (PRP) with 29 deputies and the first multi-party system began. Some of Ataturk's closest associates who had supported him in the early days of the War of Independence, such as Rauf Bey, later Rauf Orbey, Rifat Pasha, and Ali Fuat Pasha, later Ali Fuat Sebesoy, were among the members of the new party. The PRP's economic program suggested liberalism, in contrast to the statism of the CHP, and its social program was based on conservatism in contrast to the modernism of the CHP. Leaders of the party strongly supported the Kemalist revolution in principle, but had different opinions on the Cultural Revolution and the principle of secularism. The PRP was not against Ataturk's main positions as declared in its program. They supported establishing secularism in the country and the civil law, or as stated, he needs of the age Article 3 and the uniform system of education Article 49. These principles were set by the leaders at the onset. The only legal opposition became a home for all kinds of differing views. During 1926, a plot to assassinate Ataturk was uncovered in Smyrna, Izmir. It originated with a former deputy who had opposed the abolition of the caliphate. What originally was an inquiry into the planners shifted to a sweeping investigation. Ostensibly, its aims were to uncover subversive activities, but in truth, the investigation was used to undermine those disagreeing with Ataturk's cultural reforms. The investigation brought a number of political activists before the tribunal, including Karabekir, the leader of the PRP. A number of surviving leaders of the Committee of Union and Progress, including Mehmet Kavad, Ahmed Shukru, and Ismail Kanbulat, were found guilty of treason and hanged. Because the investigation found a link between the members of the PRP and the Sheikh Said rebellion, the PRP was dissolved following the outcomes of the trial. The pattern of organized opposition was broken. This action was to be the only broad political purge during Ataturk's presidency. Ataturk's statement, "My mortal body will turn into dust, but the Republic of Turkey will last forever," was regarded as a will after the assassination attempt. In the years following 1926, Ataturk introduced a radical departure from previous reformations established by the Ottoman Empire. For the first time in history, Islamic law was separated from secular law and restricted to matters of religion. He stated, "We must liberate our concepts of justice, our laws and our legal institutions from the bonds which, even though they are incompatible with the needs of our century, still hold a tight grip on us." On the 1st of March 1926, the Turkish Penal Code, modeled after the Italian Penal Code, was passed. On the 4th of October 1926, Islamic courts were closed. Establishing the civic law needed time, so Ataturk delayed the inclusion of the principle of laïcité, the constitutional principle of secularism in France, until the 5th of February 1937. In keeping with the Islamic practice of sex segregation, Ottoman practice discouraged social interaction between men and women. Ataturk began developing social reforms to address this issue very early, as was evident in his personal journal. He and his staff discussed issues such as abolishing the veiling of women and integrating women into the outside world. His plans to surmount the task were written in his journal in November 1915. The social change can come by educating capable mothers who are knowledgeable about life. Giving freedom to women. A man can change his morals, thoughts, and feelings by leading a common life with a woman, as there is an inborn tendency towards the attraction of mutual affection. Ataturk needed a new civil code to establish his second major step of giving freedom to women. The first part was the education of girls, a feat established with the unification of education. On the 4th of October 1926, the new Turkish Civil Code, modeled after the Swiss Civil Code, was passed. Under the new code, women gained equality with men in such matters as inheritance and divorce, since Ataturk did not consider gender a factor in social organization. According to his view, society marched towards its goal with men and women united. He believed that it was scientifically impossible for Turkey to achieve progress and become civilized if Ottoman gender separation persisted. During a meeting he declaimed, "To the women, win for us the battle of education and you will do yet more for your country than we have been able to do. It is to you that I appeal. To the men, if henceforward the women do not share in the social life of the nation, we shall never attain to our full development. We shall remain irremediably backward, incapable of treating on equal terms with the civilizations of the West." Additionally, the Kemalist one-party period of Turkey's labor participation rate was as high as 70%. The participation rate continued to decline after the democratization of Turkey due to the backlash of conservative norms in Turkish society. In 1927, the State Art and Sculpture Museum Ankara Resim ve Heykel Müzesi opened its doors. The museum highlighted sculpture, which was rarely practiced in Turkey due to the Islamic tradition of avoiding idolatry. Ataturk believed that culture is the foundation of the Turkish Republic, and described modern Turkey's ideological thrust as a creation of patriotism blended with a lofty humanist ideal. He included both his own nation's creative legacy and what he saw as the admirable values of global civilization. The pre-Islamic culture of the Turks became the subject of extensive research, and particular emphasis was placed on the widespread Turkish culture before the Seljuk and Ottoman civilizations. He instigated study of Anatolian civilizations, Phrygians, Lydians, Sumerians, and Hittites. To attract public attention to past cultures, he personally named the banks Summerbank 1932 after the Sumerians and Itibank 1935 after the Hittites. He also stressed the folk arts of the countryside as a wellspring of Turkish creativity. At the time, the Republic used the Ottoman Turkish language written in the Arabic script with Arabic and Persian loan vocabulary. However, as little as 10% of the population was literate. Furthermore, the American reformer John Dewey, invited by Ataturk to assist in educational reform, found that learning how to read and write Turkish in the traditional Arabic script took roughly 3 years. In the spring of 1928, Ataturk met in Ankara with several linguists and professors from all over Turkey to unveil his plan to implement a new alphabet for the written Turkish language, based on a modified Latin alphabet. The new Turkish alphabet would serve as a replacement for the old Arabic script and a solution to the literacy problem, since the new alphabet did not retain the complexities of the Arabic script and could be learned within a few months. 18. When Ataturk asked the language experts how long it would take to implement the new alphabet into the Turkish language, most of the professors and linguists said between 3 and 5 years. Ataturk was said to have scoffed and openly stated, "We shall do it in 3 to 5 months." Over the next several months, Ataturk pressed for the introduction of the new Turkish alphabet and made public announcements of the upcoming overhaul. The creation of the alphabet was undertaken by the Language Commission Dil Incumeni with the initiative of Ataturk. On the 1st of November 1928, he introduced the new Turkish alphabet and abolished the use of the Arabic script. The first Turkish newspaper using the new alphabet was published on the 15th of December 1928. Ataturk himself traveled the countryside in order to teach citizens the new alphabet. After vigorous campaigns, the literacy rate more than doubled from 10.6% in 1927 to 22.4% in 1940. To supplement the literacy reform, a number of congresses were organized on scientific issues, education, history, economics, arts, and language. Libraries were systematically developed, and mobile libraries and book transport systems were set up to serve remote districts. Literacy reform was also supported by strengthening the private publishing sector with a new law on copyrights. Ataturk promoted modern teaching methods at the primary education level, and Dewey proved integral to the effort. Dewey presented a paradigmatic set of recommendations designed for developing societies moving towards modernity in his report and recommendation for the Turkish educational system. He was interested in adult education with the goal of forming a skill base in the country. Turkish women were taught not only childcare, dressmaking, and household management but also skills necessary for joining the economy outside the home. Ataturk's unified education program became a state-supervised system, which was designed to create a skill base for the social and economic progress of the country by educating responsible citizens as well as useful and appreciated members of society. In addition, Turkish education became an integrative system, aimed to alleviate poverty and used female education to establish gender equality. Ataturk himself put special emphasis on the education of girls and supported coeducation, introducing it at university level in 1923-24 and establishing it as the norm throughout the educational system by 1927. Ataturk's reforms on education made it significantly more accessible. Between 1923 and 1938, the number of students attending primary schools increased by 224% from 342,000 to 765,000. The number of students attending middle schools increased by 12.5 times from around 6,000 to 74,000, and the number of students attending high schools increased by almost 17 times from 1,200 to 21,000. Ataturk generated media attention to propagate modern education during this period. He instigated official education meetings called science boards and education summits to discuss the quality of education, training issues, and certain basic educational principles. He said, "Our school's curriculum should aim to provide opportunities for all pupils to learn and to achieve." He was personally engaged with the development of 2 textbooks. The first one, Vatandaş için Medeni Bilgiler Civic Knowledge for the Citizens, 1930, introduced the science of comparative government and explained the means of administering public trust by explaining the rules of governance as applied to the new state institutions. The second, Geometry, 1937, was a text for high schools and introduced many of the terms currently used in Turkey to describe geometry. On the 11th of August 1930, Ataturk decided to try a multi-party movement once again and asked Fethi Okyur to establish a new party. Ataturk insisted on the protection of secular reforms. The brand new Liberal Republican Party succeeded all around the country. However, without the establishment of a real political spectrum, the party became the center to opposition of Ataturk's reforms, particularly in regard to the role of religion in public life. On the 23rd of December 1930, a chain of violent incidents occurred, instigated by the rebellion of Islamic fundamentalists in Menemen, a small town in the Aegean region. The Menemen incident came to be considered a serious threat against secular reforms. In November 1930, Ali Fethi Okyur dissolved his own party. A more lasting multi-party period of the Republic of Turkey began in 1945. In 1950, the CHP ceded the majority position to the Democratic Party. This came amidst arguments that Ataturk's single-party rule did not promote direct democracy. The reason experiments with pluralism failed during this period was that not all groups in the country had agreed to a minimal consensus regarding shared values, mainly secularism, and shared rules for conflict resolution. In response to such criticisms, Ataturk's biographer Andrew Mango writes, "Between the two wars, democracy could not be sustained in many relatively richer and better educated societies." Ataturk's enlightened authoritarianism left a reasonable space for free private lives. More could not have been expected in his lifetime. Even though, at times, he did not appear to be a democrat in his actions, Ataturk always supported the idea of building a civil society, a system of voluntary civic and social organizations and institutions as opposed to the force-backed structures of the state. In one of his many speeches about the importance of democracy, Ataturk said in 1933, "Republic means the democratic administration of the state. We founded the Republic, reaching its 10th year. It should enforce all the requirements of democracy as the time comes." In 1931, Ataturk established the Turkish Language Association Türk Dil Kurumu for conducting research works in the Turkish language. The Turkish Historical Society Türk Turi Kurumu was established in 1931 and began maintaining archives in 1932 for conducting research works on the history of Turkey. On the 1st of January 1928, he established the Turkish Education Association, which supported intelligent and hardworking children in financial need, as well as material and scientific contributions to the educational life. In 1933, Ataturk ordered the reorganization of Istanbul University into a modern institution and later established Ankara University in the capital city. I stop at this point today. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and keep exploring the world's incredible stories. Soon we will publish Part 4. Thank you for watching.